Good day, everybody. Welcome to the Merchandiser Minute for Friday, October the 30th, 2020. This is Robert Harper with Virginia Farm Bureau's Grain Division. Let's take a look at how the futures closed out in Chicago this week to start this 7 minutes that we have together off with. December corn down 21 cents a bushel for the week to close at $3.98. November soybeans down 27 cents a bushel for the week to close at $10.56. July wheat down 26 cents a bushel for the week to close at $5.92. Remember, for most of us out here who are trading cash bushels, today is the last day for November soybeans. We will all be moving to the January futures contract on Monday. There was a lot of position squaring this week, month-end position squaring before the election next week, as well as position squaring with soybeans, with speculators, commercials, and even farmers getting out of November futures altogether, or getting out of November futures and rolling into the January. It seemed like this week that the theme in Chicago, at least on South Street where these futures trade, was let's take some risk off the table. We know these speculators are long futures contracts. The way they get their profit is to sell the contract they bought initially, and that was definitely going on in Washington this week, or not Washington, but in Chicago. Let's take a look from Washington at what the USDA told us this week. When we look at weekly export inspections, what loaded out on vessels or rail cars this week and headed around the world, we had a very light export inspections week for corn, and then we had the exact opposite in soybeans, where 97 million bushels of beans were loaded out. I had one person in the trade tell me he didn't look the numbers up, but he was guessing that would be close to a record for soybeans to have 97 million bushels loaded out in 1 week. Our top destination for corn this week was Mexico. For soybeans, the top destination was China, and for wheat, the top inspection destination was Japan. That report comes out on Monday, as y'all know. When we switch a gear and go to Thursday and we get the export sales report, we saw a really strong report this week for sales in wheat. The top destinations buying U.S. wheat was South Korea and Japan. 27 million bushels sold, and if you look back, the 10-week average during this marketing year for wheat is 18 million. So we were above the 10-week average there. We had the highest week of this new marketing year for corn that started on September 1st, the highest week of corn sales this week. That's very positive. And the top destination there is unknown. Beans, top destination for sales this week was China. If I take a couple of minutes and talk about that unknown on the export sales report, a lot of times people think initially that that's China, and it may very well be. I spoke with Farm Bureau's broker this week to try to understand that a little bit better, and what he was sharing with me, when you look at basically the main 4 grain companies around the world, Dreyfus, Bunge, Cargill, and ADM, sometimes they'll purchase beans and they won't know where they're actually going to sell them to. So it truly is an unknown in some instances. We did get flash sales announcements this week in addition to the weekly export sales report. And remember, if a commercial entity makes a sale over 100,000 metric tons, that's basically, depending on what commodity you're talking about, but I think simple, that's basically 4 million bushel. If a sale is made over 100,000 metric tons, that has to be reported on the daily reporting system. It'll show up also on the weekly system, but we get it daily as well. When we look at harvest numbers in the U.S., corn came in at 72% harvested, 56% is the 5-year average. For U.S. soybeans, 83% harvested, the 5-year average is 73%. If we drop back and look at Virginia corn harvest, 90% done. 5-year averages, we're finished by now. So we know we're a little bit behind. A lot of folks have that last, say, 10% of their acres or 20% of their acres to get done. Virginia bean harvest, 28% complete. We were up in the high 40s a year ago right now, but I'm reminding everybody the 5-year average right now for Virginia beans should be 33%, so we're not that far behind. We came into the week with the speculators being very long futures, and again, we talked earlier about how they took some of that risk off the table by selling that contract and putting the profit in the bank. Outside influences definitely did drive the commodity markets this week, but interestingly enough, just in my opinion, it didn't seem like the majority of those influences were coming from the upcoming presidential election. It seemed like they were coming from COVID fears. We saw multiple countries last weekend in Europe put curfews on and lock down. We've seen some more of that this week. We've even seen cities around the United States where COVID cases are spiking to lock down more, and that obviously has the speculator anxious. So those outside influences, the sell-off to some degree in the equity markets this week. We had a rally in the dollar futures this week, and that caused the corn, wheat, and soybean speculator to want to get out. We did get rain again this week across Russia. They can sow more winter wheat. We did get rain in Argentina and in Brazil. It's been a very aggressive planting pace in Brazil and Argentina over the last 2 weeks. They're catching up. And one thing to remember too about your corn price, in Brazil and in China, domestic corn prices are at or near records. And we know that Brazil is the number 3 corn producer in the world. China's the number 2 corn producer in the world. And if their domestic prices are as high as they are, it's telling us they need corn. That makes a really good demand picture for U.S. corn going forward. Briefly, we saw this week's gross domestic product, the value of all goods and services in our economy. The GDP numbers came out for the third quarter. We saw the highest growth ever, however you want to look at it, 7.4% above the second quarter, or if it's annualized, 33%. So big GDP numbers that helped stop some of the sell-off in the equity markets. We're going to look for more of that next week as all eyes will be on the presidential election, South American planning progress, as well as weather in Russia also. November 10th will be our next crop report. We'll look forward to talking with you on the phone. This is Robert at Farm Bureau's Grain Division.